All right, welcome back. This is the Something Ventured podcast. I am Kent Lindstrom. I am your host. My guest today is Bill Davidow. How are you doing?
I'm doing just great.
Well, thank you so much for doing this. We could be here all day going through Bill's background, but broadly, the chapters are he's been a leader at some of the most important tech companies at some of the most important times in their history, no less than General Electric, HP, and Intel. He then went on to found the seminal venture firm More Davidow, and has authored and co-authored a number of books. He authored Marketing High Technology and Overconnected. He co-authored The Virtual Corporation and has now co-authored with Michael Moore, The Autonomous Revolution, Reclaiming the Future We Sold to Machines. So you've been keeping quite busy.
I guess so.
What, it seems at some point in your writing, and we'll focus on that as opposed to the amazing career, it seems that you turned from kind of, sharing knowledge with people, marketing high technology, to saying, hey, these technologies are a bit of a double-edged sword, and the other edge is, pretty sharp and might be something we should be paying attention to.
Yeah, what has suddenly dawned on me is that, the technologies, when I was at Intel, we used to get up and feel like we were putting on our Superman shirts and going out and changing the world. And what we were doing was automating existing processes. In other words, we made a stoplight run better, or we made a typewriter into a word processor. But if you looked at it, there was still a factory or there was still a stoplight. We didn't change the structure of things. And what is different today is that our technologies are changing the social and economic structure of things. So think of it this way, a bank robbery no longer is a physical holdup, it's a transaction on the phone. Or a bank is going to become an application on your phone. And that's very different from giving the teller a way of automatically totaling up your deposits.
Right. And you are saying that this is such a profound change that it's basically the third in history. There was the agricultural revolution. That was about 12,000 years ago, so these don't happen very often. The industrial revolution, I guess that was about 250 years ago, and here we are in an autonomous revolution. Has this been going on since the 60s and 70s, or is this a newer phenomenon, or what's the...
I think that you date the autonomous revolution from the start of the internet applications and Facebook and AI. So I'd say around 2000.
Right. And so what implications do we begin to see now? Because it seems that we're only starting to grapple with it. You say it's a phase change, something like water turning to ice. And the problem is until you know what ice is, you don't really know how to deal with it. You know what the properties of the Industrial Revolution were. We understood how inflation worked and things like that. How do we approach what's happening to us now?
Well, I think the first thing you've got to do is say the old rules aren't going to work anymore, and the old forms aren't going to work anymore. And then, I was thinking about everybody says, where are the jobs going to come from? Well, if you are a well-educated person today, there's probably never been more opportunity because you can adjust to the change and you can say, hey, because of this change, there are going to be all these opportunities in these new areas. And so I'm going to move from one area to the next. And so for, a well-educated population that is willing to approach this with energy and commitment, it's a world of opportunity. For somebody who doesn't have those skills or those abilities, who are dependent upon the old forms for support, they're in trouble.
Right. And how this is something, as I kind of read through your book, I was thinking about, why is it, I've always pondered this, if you think about unemployment, it's generally something like forgetting our current moment, 4% or 8% or 10%. How is it that it takes almost exactly perfectly, 90 to 95% of the people available to do the work required? In other words, why don't 22% of people generate all the, you know, assets we need?
Well, I think that maybe necessity is the father of invention, so we keep finding new things for people to do, so we keep creating opportunities. I think today, the challenge is that we may not be able to create the opportunities fast enough. I mean, these technologies have such broad impact, and it, it turns out it's going to turn everything upside down. I mean, I believe in free markets, but free markets have their flaws. They do not allocate wealth based on social contribution. They allocate wealth based on your ability to make money. And I look, and in the future, we may be living in a society where we're going to have to find ways to compensate people based on their social contribution, as opposed to whether they're just a great high-speed trader.
Right. And what do you make of the sort of, it just seems that the number of people required to do things, take the Facebook or, Microsoft, one person, I don't know the exact numbers, but it takes one person to generate, say, $6 million in revenue.
Yes.
Where somewhere like GM or whatever, it took, you needed tens and tens of thousands of people to generate billions of dollars. And here you need just a relative handful.
Yeah, I mean, the best example I know is when Netflix put Blockbuster Video out of business. Blockbuster Video had 9,000 stores and 60,000 employees, and Netflix, I think, had 1,000 employees. And,
Right.
And those are the kinds of things that happen. But I was thinking about this, and if you and I were alive 200 or 300 years ago, utopia would be a place where we didn't have to work. Utopia work was so backbreaking and horrible,
Right.
and dirty that utopia was a place we didn't have to work. Today, utopia is a good job with benefits.
Right.
And so our definition of utopia may change in the future. and
Right.
and these are the kinds of things that are going to happen. And I mean, I don't know what the world is going to be like. And I'm old now, and I have plenty to do, and I enjoy life, and I don't go to the office every day. And I think that there are lots of people who have plenty to do and would enjoy life if they didn't go to the office every day, and they're making a social contribution. And I feel in my own little way I'm making a social contribution, and I feel good about what I'm doing. And so maybe life is going to be very, very different in the future. And our lives have been dominated by the Protestant work ethic, and maybe that's going to change in the future.
Right. And so what do you posit? It sounds like I see where you're headed, but is it the case that we think, well, the jobs will just shift, but everybody will be employed? Mark Andreessen makes this argument that, autonomous cars are going to put all the Uber drivers out of work. But of course, the Uber drivers didn't exist as a job until technology created that job. Or will it be the case that 70% of people will be unemployed because it just isn't required? The machines can do their work.
Well, if you look at it and you say we've crossed what Brian Arthur refers to as the Keynes point, if you divide the GNP by the number of families, it comes out to be, I think, $70,000 a year. We're living in a world of abundance. The issue is how you decide to distribute that abundance. And I don't want to sound like a socialist or what have you, but if, and I don't have any problems with Jeff Bezos having $100 billion. What we have to make sure of is that people have enough, and and we have to make sure that we have a way of getting enough to people, and our wealth distribution system dependent on people having a job. And we can say, all right, in the future, we're going to have somebody dig a hole in the ground with a shovel and somebody else fill it in, and we're going to create jobs that way.
Right.
Or, we may have to find other ways of compensating people for doing things that are socially useful. I mean, you think about it, and here I am, I'm a parent at home taking care of a kid. I want to go to work. So I put my child in childcare. I pay for that. I get a subsidy from the government for putting my child in childcare. Maybe the government should pay me the subsidy for staying at home, taking care of the child. I think we're going to have to think about things like that. And it's easy to just say, "Oh my God, that's horrible." It's going to have all these implications and what have you. But we're going to have to figure out a solution and figure out a mechanism for wealth distribution that has positive social effects. And I don't think that that's necessarily just handing people money willy-nilly, but we have to figure out something.
You use the term zero economic value citizens. Some people are just rendered having no economic value. Who is rendered having no value, or how does that happen?
Well, if you do not have a skill, or I'm going to pay you money for your skill, you have zero economic value. And I think there are people who are in that situation right now. And that doesn't mean that they have zero social value. It means that our compensation system today, like a mother at home, has zero economic value. There is no way that she can earn money for taking care of her own kids. What we do is this is getting a little bit sexist because I'm using the word mother, but anyhow, the caregiver, or however you want to put it, the way we compensate that caregiver is the other caregiver goes out and earns enough money so that she can do her job or his job. And these are really complicated issues, and we know that if you just hand people cash, a lot of people are going to just become useless people and will have no self-esteem. So you've got the issue of self-esteem, and the job became the way we defined or gained self-esteem. And so that if there isn't work for everybody, how does somebody achieve self-esteem?
Right. And how does somebody achieve self-esteem in that scenario? Do you just aspire to be in the set of people who have the skills, or is there a class of people who are getting paid to, I don't know, paint or?
I mean, these are the issues that we are going to end up with a new value system, and it's interesting. I went through a really interesting experience yesterday. Somebody from the area in which I grew up in had written a detailed history of the Boy Scouts in our area. And I mean, going back to 1900 or some period, I don't know when the Boy Scouts were founded, but this was it was almost 100 pages long. And it had all these things, like I was a member of Troop 324, the best in the shore. And it pointed out that Troop 324 resulted from the merger of Troop 3, Troop 2, and Troop 4. Right. And I mean, he had gone through all of this. And I sent him an email when I got it. And I said, you may not know about the Great Braeside School revolt against the Boy Scouts when we marched on our scout leader's home because he did not show up for a troop meeting.
Oh, boy.
And they ultimately disbanded our troop, and we became members of another troop. And I did that sort of tongue-in-cheek. But as I was reflecting on this, and I was looking through the history of this, the number of people who put energy into creating the Boy Scouts, and that was unpaid work. And they used to take us on camping trips and this and that and the other thing. And there was great social value in doing that. And I was thinking about the great experiences I had. And then you say, hey, there are lots of jobs like that in the community that have tremendous social value. And maybe today we need to pay Boy Scout leaders or somebody who coaches basketball in the inner city. Who does it on his own. We may have to figure out different ways to compensate people.
In terms of the complexities here, it seems that these other revolutions, economically, they functioned in a pretty straightforward way when it came to sort of inflation. You sort of knew how that aspect of it worked. Now we seem to be in this strange world where certain things are very deflationary. I don't know, Netflix is all the entertainment you could possibly want for $10 a month. And then certain things, healthcare, education, I don't know, food maybe, don't operate on that scale. Healthcare is not dropping to $10 a month for all the healthcare you need. How do those forces come at each other?
Well, I mean, a lot of these things that we designed were designed in a different environment. As an example, right now we're in an environment where typical middle-class person is earning a living in a deflationary environment and trying to live in an inflationary one. He's getting paid robots' wages, or his wages are being determined by what a good, hard-working robot will do the job for. And yet the cost of food and housing and things like that is increasing faster than inflation. And, so, all right, I'll give you a typical example. Debt, if you look at it, it is horrible in this environment. And debt should be indexed to inflation. Now, no self-respecting banker would ever agree with that, right. But and we're willing to have interest rates fluctuate. But if I'm in a deflationary environment and I loan you $1, and 10 years later the dollar is worth 10% more, I should be happy getting back 90 cents. And so these are the kinds of issues that we're going to end up facing with phase change. And it turns out that debt during the agricultural revolution and during the industrial revolution which were basically pretty much inflationary environments, debt was designed in an inflationary environment. Debt was not designed to work properly in a deflationary one. And we've got lots of issues we're going to have to address.
So as we have this conversation from, our different offices, because COVID has kind of shaken things up, how is that playing into this, phase change that was going on anyway? Now we have an acceleration of, people staying at home and technologies.
I think COVID is accelerating the process. I mean, one of the things that always happens during these phase changes is that we rebuild the physical infrastructure of society. So that we created the industrial city, we created the suburbs, things like this. Today, we were grappling with the fact that we had too much shopping space and too much office space, and that we were seeing that people were living at home, and that meant that maybe they'd like to have their homes designed a little bit differently, and so I think COVID is accelerating this trend.
Do you think people are going to, stay at home and keep doing this, or are people just too social to not be in cities mingling and going out to dinner?
Well, I think, number one, all right, I think people should be with people, and COVID is exacerbating the situation, but we have a real problem, and that is that people are choosing to live in virtual worlds. And it turns out that you were evolved to live in a physical world. And in a physical world, a tree was not created to be firewood. You manage the world. In a virtual, and the physical world had no purpose, and you were running the physical world. I mean, that's what we tried to do. When you go to a virtual world has a purpose. And the purpose of the virtual world is to control your behavior. And it benefits from absorbing you in it, and it is a world that you were not evolved to deal with. You have five senses, and your senses are key to your consciousness. Now, in the virtual world, you lose smell and touch and taste. You still have hearing, but you don't get to hear the whole environment, so you're hearing impaired, right. And you're also visually impaired. So you are essentially you're down to two senses, both of which are impaired. So people have to realize that they really aren't conscious in virtual worlds, not in the same sense that you're conscious in a physical world. And if you look at it, for example, we're beginning to suspect all kinds of things about virtual worlds, like young people who show internet addiction symptoms show higher levels of ADHD. Right. So how is this affecting people's brains? We are running the largest social experiment in the history of humanity. 3.5 billion people are connected to social networks.
Yep.
And we've suddenly put them in an alien environment. And if I were a university researcher and said, I'd like to run experiments on 3.5 billion people, um, every university would fire me
Right.
instantly. And yet we're doing it without understanding the impact of these technologies on people. And the interesting thing about this is that the people who are running those experiments told us that the internet was going to bring the world together. So their vision and ability to predict what is going to happen has not been very accurate. And so when they tell us that they're going to make our lives better because of these technologies, you've got to look at their record and say, hey, they never told us about election interference. They never told us about social polarization. What don't they understand?
Right. And who solves these problems? Is it governments? Is it benevolent versions of these huge social networks? Is it people collectively rising up? Like, where does what would you like to see happen? Is there a government policy that should be put in place, or?
Well, I there are a number of things you can do. For example, I think all of us who believe in the free market believe that if you underprice something that is extremely valuable, it gets abused. What we have done is we've underpriced the internet. And what we've created is a productivity tool for antisocial behavior. And what we're getting is a lot of antisocial behavior. So that it just makes sense that if you raise the price of antisocial behavior, you're going to get less of it. So one of the things you would like to do is reduce the level of antisocial behavior. We got more when we reduced the cost to zero, so let's raise the cost of antisocial behavior a little bit. That seems
Right.
easy to do.
And is that a tax or a?
Well, you can charge for email, you can charge for internet connection time, and if you charge for, people, if you charge internet sites based on the number of people that are connected to them, then those sites are either going to have to charge people or pay for it themselves. I mean, there are things like this you could do. All of these are extremely radical ideas,
Right.
but we're experiencing something that we've never experienced before, and the old rules just aren't going to work.
The forces here seem so extreme when you're talking about income and the polarization. How does this phase shift? Of course, you don't know, but how could this phase shift play out? Is there a revolution or an uprising? Is there a civil war version of this, or is it just a series of policies sort of playing themselves out over time?
Well, there was something we called the French Revolution. There were things like that. I mean, I think that I think you have to deal with these social problems, and if you don't deal with them, you're going to get radical solutions, and whether that be a revolution or an autocracy or something like that, if you create enough disenfranchised people, you're going to have problems. And right now, we're moving in our country, at least at the current time, more in an autocratic direction, and so that's one way we're choosing to deal with it.
Right. Let me head toward finishing up on this. What is there anything as you look back to when you were looking forward to this time? Is there anything that kind of predicted this? Is there any science fiction you read or any thoughts you had when you were helping create some of these technologies, or has this just been something we've learned as it unfolded?
Well, I had read things like 1984 and all those wonderful things, and you know, I mean, uh, uh, I, I, I don't think I, I certainly didn't see this coming. I mean, you know, I mean, I when I was at Intel, I had a hard time believing that the personal computer was going to happen. And that may sound ridiculous, but when you didn't have a simple operating system and when microprocessors were running at 100,000 instructions, a second, a personal computer seemed a long way away.
Right.
And you know, between 1973 and 1980, boom, it happened. And so I don't think we're very good at seeing these things.
That's right. Well, let me finish. What do you, having gone through the thought process to produce the book, The Autonomous Revolution, what are you optimistic about?
Well, all right. We live in a period of abundance. When we made our adjustments to the Industrial Revolution and the Agricultural Revolution, we were going through a period of scarcity. And if we can't, and we figured out how to deal with that, if we can't figure out how to deal with this in a period of abundance, we are a lot dumber than I think people are. And so abundance gives us a lot of flexibility. And so I'm very optimistic that we're going to figure out a way to deal with this.
That's great. Well, I appreciate this very much. The book, The Autonomous Revolution, Reclaiming the Future We Sold to Machines, is available everywhere now, right?
Well, almost everywhere. You can get it. You can get it virtually for sure.
Of course. All right. Well, my guest has been Bill Davidow. Thank you very much.